How long does it take to become a really, really good software engineer? You might say 4 years, but that's not true because there are all these programs where you go in with zero coding knowledge and 4 months later you graduate and you get job offers from some of the top tech companies in Silicon Valley. How long does it take to learn a language? Well, you might say 3 years, you might say 5 years, you might say 1 year, you might say 10 years. There are people who go to a foreign country knowing nothing about the language, and 3 months later they're speaking fluently. One of those people is Scott Young, who taught himself the entire MIT computer science curriculum in just 1 year, and then taught himself Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin Chinese, and Korean in 1 year. Not 1 year apiece, but 1 year total. In his book Ultralearning, he breaks down how he did it. A lot of the time I hear people say that it's no longer possible to become a Renaissance man. It's no longer possible to become very good at many things because the body of knowledge that we have today in the 21st century is so big, and it would be impossible for any one person to become an expert in more than one thing. Of course, that assumption breaks down if you can become really, 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 really good at learning, right? If you can learn in 1 year or in 3 months what it takes other people 3 years or 4 years or 10 years to learn, then you can become an expert in a lot more stuff. Learning is basically the ultimate skill. If you're really, really good at learning, then you can become really, really good at whatever you want to be really, really good at. In Ultralearning, Scott Young gives you his 9-step method for how to learn. I'm not going to go over all 9 steps. If you want them, read the book. But I am going to briefly break down 3 of the things that I think are most important. One of those principles is that if you want to learn anything, especially if you want to teach yourself something, and especially if you want to learn something really, really quickly, then you have to have a plan. Now, Scott Young calls this meta-learning, and basically what it breaks down to is have some idea of the road ahead. Obviously, when you're learning, you don't know what you need to know, and so it's impossible to know exactly what your journey is going to look like. But at the same time, by investing a lot of time in doing good research, you can figure out what people before you have done in order to learn what you want to learn. And you can give yourself a good roadmap and a good idea of what you need to do in order to become proficient quickly. Most of us think of learning as something where the teacher shows us what to do and we do it. And while it's helpful to have mentors, this approach doesn't always work with Ultralearning, partially because the way that most subjects are taught is not efficient, and you can learn things a lot faster if you skip over the parts that are just too slow or irrelevant. Another principle of learning is that the brain learns a lot faster when it's active. I had this experience when I was learning Spanish, and when I would just listen passively to people talking in Spanish, I wouldn't really understand it. I didn't feel like I was improving. But then I learned a few exercises for, actually when you're listening, you have to stop and write down every word that you hear, and do this exercise, memorize this phrase, and it's hard work. But what ends up happening is you become a lot more familiar with the words, you become a lot more familiar with the sounds. Your brain has to change itself in order to master what you're trying to do. Scott Young says that the reason why more people don't do things this way is because it's hard, right? Like if you're grinding at something, if you're using a lot of mental focus to solve a problem, then it's going to be tough, right? Like thinking is hard work. It's much easier to sit back and passively watch a lecture. And the final principle of learning is that it's much better to really understand something than just know it. This is a major problem with our school system. Is a lot of what it rewards you to do is memorize stuff, but you can't actually take the knowledge that you got and apply it to another situation because you don't really understand it. You don't know how to explain it in your own words. You don't know how to use it in novel situations. All you know how to do with it is use it to solve the sorts of problems that are going to be on an exam. In the book, Scott Young talks about how the physicist Richard Feynman, anytime he needed to know a math theorem for his work or for whatever, he wouldn't just read about it, he would actually prove the theorem. And in doing so, he grasped a greater appreciation for it and was able to tinker around with it and do more stuff with it and be much more flexible with it. In the Robert Heinlein novel, Stranger in a Strange Land, there's a Martian word called grokking, which is basically just to understand something at a very, very deep level. And in order to really use the things that you learn, you have to grok them. The final thing that you need to understand is that Anybody can take these principles of ultralearning and use them to learn better and learn faster themselves. A lot of people think that they can't do something, or they're too stupid to learn something, or they're just not good at something, and that's usually not true. Usually, if they failed to learn something in the past, it's because they took the wrong approach, or it's because they had a bad teacher. And if they sat down and really tried it again, they could figure it out. Obviously, some people are smarter than others. Some people have more inborn talent than others. Yada yada yada. But don't let that discourage you. Research has shown that the human brain is incredibly plastic, and if you try to learn something and you learn it the right way, you will learn it. I highly recommend trying to learn something because, first of all, it's a massive self-esteem booster. It gives you the idea that anything that you want to do, you can do. Right? When you face uncertainty, when you do something that you're not sure that you will succeed at, and then you do succeed at it, it works wonders for your confidence. It'll also show you better ways to learn things, so that the next time you have to learn something for your work or for school or for your family life or whatever, it will be clear to you how to do it, and how to do it quickly, and how to do it well. So what can you use the principles of ultralearning to learn? Well, the sky's the limit, right? You could teach yourself French, you could learn about neuroscience, you could learn to play piano, you could take a few strokes off your golf game. It's really up to you. Reading this book really excited me because it made me feel like the possibilities are endless and that I can do just about anything that I set my mind to. As Henry Ford said, anyone who continues learning stays young. So if you're new around here, my name's Theo. This is Theo's Book Club. Welcome. I make short videos about the books that I'm reading so that you can learn what I learned and so that you can decide whether or not you want to read these books. If you like this video, click the like button down below. That tells YouTube that this was a good video. They should recommend it to more people. You can also hit the subscribe button if you want to see my face pop up in your feed and your algorithm a little bit more often. So have a great day, and I hope you go teach yourself something cool.